3 years ago, I bought this little Thinty mini PC for 150 Canadian dollars. Now obviously it's about as powerful as a chihuahua with an arrhythmia, but still, it's a working PC for 150 Canadian dollars. Something which in 2026, with all of the rampant inflation and shortages, surely doesn't exist anymore, does it? Well, apparently it does, and in today's video we're gonna see how it holds up to the little Thinty. But first, if every time you use your mechanical keyboard, your co-workers and loved ones want to batter you with it, then Be Quiet's new light and dark mount silent mechanical keyboards are for you. But not only are their silent switches silent, but they also have a dazzling array of features. From a hot swappable numpad on the dark mount with display keys, very exciting, a control panel that lets you set a bunch of features without having to install any software, and a huge amount more. So go check out the Be Quiet light and dark mount keyboards using the link down below. Wow, that was stronger than I was expecting. Boss game mini piece. Well, I mean, it's got game in the name, right? So surely it's gonna be good at gaming. We're gonna find out today. We will test it. Obviously, that's like the one thing I know how to test. Wow, we get the actual box bit with the mini PC. We get a 0.6 amp power supply, which is not very much. It smells like jarritos. Is that what you call them? The like Mexican soda? That's very weird. It's like a sweet soda smell in here. We also get a short HDMI cable, which again is standard seemingly with mini PCs. And then a little VESA mount adapter thing for your mini PC. So presumably you can mount it to the back of your monitor and turn it into like a DIY all-in-one PC. We also get a manual, which of course we're not gonna read, and then finally, our little PC. Now, physically, it is a decent amount bigger than the little Thinty, but apparently it is fanless, so that explains why we've got so much ventilation on it. There's on the top, there's some ventilation on the side, below which we have a full-size SD card slot. I already love this PC. And then we have dual USB 3 ports next to a power button, which does not need to have that arousing a click. This is so good! We've just got one HDMI port on it, which is one less than the Thinty has, but it makes up for it in other ways. It's got different exciting holes on it, which we'll get into in a second. Clear CMOS hole, I love that. And then on the other side is a Mesozoic period port. So we lose one of our HDMI ports in exchange for some old analog video out. Might be useful for you, but other than that, we just have a whole bunch of ventilation over this thing. It looks very purposeful. I kind of like it. Oh, that power button is so good. I want that power button on my car. That is amazing. Now, while past Dawid is busy power button gooning, let me quickly fill you in on the specs of these little systems. Now, the Thinty mini PC from 2003 is a beast with a whopping 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of eMMC storage. And all of that memory feeds a Celeron N3350, a CPU that looks up to whatever the internals of a CPAP are. Now, unfortunately, 3 years later, for 150 Canadian dollars, we don't gain any more memory or storage, but CPU-wise, we go from an Apollo Lake Celeron to a Gemini Lake N4020, which unfortunately is still a dual-core wet fart of a CPU, but maybe its fart is slightly drier than the older one? But before we find out its viscosity, let's quickly tear open the boss game and see what kind of internals we're working with. Now, considering that we don't have any obvious screws on the bottom, I'm assuming they're hiding under the little feet. Yeah. Well, straight on the bottom, there's not a whole lot going on, except there is some blank space for more memory. So I'm assuming there is an 8 gig version of this mini PC, which obviously would cost a bit more. And then here is our eMMC storage. That's our 64 gigs. But let's take this out. This system is not eager about coming out. Am I like missing screws somewhere? I think it's our Mesozoic period port that's really screwing us here. Oh, there we go. Oh, and the Wi-Fi antenna. Oh no. Okay, well that's pretty cool, aside from our passive heatsink, which is a reasonable bit bigger than what we see in the Thinty, although the Thinty has a fan, so that helps it out. But we got this big heatsink. Next to that though, we have an M.2 slot on this. So this system actually has the option for us to add some more storage in, which is really cool because the Thinty doesn't have that option. But other than that though, there is not a whole lot going on in here, which I think means we need to go back in the past, fire up this little system and see how it compares to the Thinty. Hey, that's Windows 10, that's exciting. And straight off the bat, the Cinebench performance was real impressive. It took about half an hour to complete the multi-core run with a dazzling result. Nice, there's nothing quite like some bottom-feeding Cinebench score. 321 points gives us about 2 points per dollar spent, which is hopefully better than the 3-year-old one. Let's see. It's more than twice as better, which is a huge performance uplift over just 3 years at the same price, if only graphics cards trended this way. Now when it comes to single core performance, it's not quite as impressive. The big boss is just 70% faster. And this massive performance increase leads to a much more usable desktop experience. Just trying to navigate Windows on the Thinty is an oubliette-esque experience, whereas the big boss feels borderline snappy navigating Windows. But what's its gaming experience like? I was about to say that was a real good sign, and then the game just went down. I mean, it took Steam down with it, which is kind of impressive. Oh, that also sucks. Oh no. Okay, I did download Half-Life 2 onto the system, so I may have to delete that for this to work. And then we're also getting low system memory though. There's nothing I can do about that. Oh yeah, look at that. 3 whole frames per second at 1080p, so that's definitely too brave. But maybe we're using high settings, so we have some headroom there.
A few moments later.
No, it's all on low, just straight off the bat. I don't think I've ever seen the load screen image take time to render in. That's crazy. What followed was suffering that was borderline difficult to watch. The PC was really struggling to figure out how to make CS2 happen. Okay, yeah, it just needed a moment to familiarize itself with the game. And now we're getting almost 8 frames per second, depending on what's going on. Okay, we may be introducing too much extra load on the system by trying to reduce the volume while the game is running. But I think we figured it out, I think we're good. Now, one thing that's crazy about what's happening here is in previous tests that I've done, this benchmark gives you much higher frame rates than even playing like an online match without bots. So this is best case scenario we're looking at now. And once the benchmark finished running, we got quite the result. With a 1% low of 0.1 frames per second is awesome. I then tried loading into an online match to see if the little system could run CS2 with no bots, but unfortunately the game just crashed and then wouldn't launch again. So that was it for CS2. A result which isn't too embarrassing for Big Boss, considering that the Thinty didn't even initially run the benchmark and then crash forever. Next, I tried Cyberpunk, which refused to launch, obviously, and the same goes for Battlefield 6, which meant it was time to revert to an old fan favorite. Oh my god, it's been loading so long! I have spent so much time waiting for this thing. I don't even know how I'm gonna get around to testing the other one, because I don't think I have enough time left in my life to do that. It ended up taking half an hour to load into the game, but at least it made up for it with an immaculate experience. Yay! It's finally happened! Oh. Yes, and it was so worth it. Oh, yes. It's been a while since I've seen GTA 5 in X-ray vision or whatever the hell this is. We've got 10 frames per second, but that's probably going to go lower as things start rendering in. Wow, that is a lot of cars. Now, what's interesting here is we're using 1080p with the lowest settings in the game, and we are actually running into a CPU bottleneck. So there is nothing we can do to get more frame rate here because Well, it's not the graphics card that's the problem, it's the CPU. Now, I'm thinking that this issue might actually be a RAM problem, because when it does run, it's a pretty consistent 12 to 8 frames per second that we get, like here. But then there are these massive dropouts, which I think has to do with RAM loading in. Either way, there's not really anything we can do about it, but yeah, is this playable? I then tried GTA 5 on the Thinty, which really screwed me around. It took well over an hour for it to load into the game, but once it did, the result was really interesting. This is a very interesting result. I'm glad I powered through. I very nearly rage quit several times, but the game like fully loaded in straight off the bat, but we've got way less frame rate than we had with the boss game. I was kind of expecting it to not load harder than the boss game did. So I'm done. What in the world? Okay, so we're finally gaming. We've got almost 100 frames per second in Half-Life 2. And after the initial earthquake of frame time graph that we had, it's actually stabilized fine. Like, the game's running okay now. And I mean, now that we're outside, it's getting worse. The frame time graph is kind of going crazy, which is really not a good sign for a game that can run on my catheter. Oh, it's so stuttery. I think even with Half-Life 2, the 4 gigs of RAM is a little bit of an issue. Also, now that we've been gaming for a while, the temperatures are getting kind of out of hand. We're seeing 85 to 86 degrees Celsius on the CPU, and that is with an ambient temperature of like 15 degrees. So not very promising in terms of thermals, but this is maxing the system out, so this is worst case scenario. And with Half-Life 2, we finally had a game where I could directly compare the gaming performance of the two mini PCs. And like with Cinebench, we were getting almost double the performance with the boss game over the Thinty, which again is a massive performance jump over 3 years of $100 mini PCs. Although the boss game couldn't do this with File Explorer, which is pretty sick. Hopefully they reintroduce this feature with 2027 $100 mini PCs. And finally, I decided to try some Mint Linux on the boss game, the installation process of which went suspiciously smoothly. Welcome to Mint. That was insanely easy. I feel like something needs to break, because I shouldn't say that yet, because I haven't actually started running emulation on it yet, so things could still go very wrong. And wrong they did go, because I could not get PCSX2 running properly for the life of me. Now, the initial problem had nothing to do with PCSX2, I just really struggled getting an Xbox controller connected to the little PC. Mint kept telling me that it was connected, but the little light was still flashing on the controller and I wasn't getting any inputs out of it. Eventually I gave up and just plugged it in with a cable, which worked. Oh, that's not good. We've got some pretty serious artifacting happening. Oh, that is not a good look for Crash Bandicoot. We've got uranium spillage on everything. He looks pretty concerned about all of the radioactivity around him. This might be a PS2 BIOS issue, so let me see if I can quickly deal with this. Long story short, I couldn't fix the problem. I tried many things, although legally, because it's emulation, I don't know how much I can talk about the things that I tried, but I tried many and none of them worked. Luckily, RetroArch didn't have the same problem, and I could get some of my older console games running without a problem on the little mini PC. The fact that the mini PC is fully passive makes it a really good little retro game emulation box, although it's not very powerful as we've seen, so you need to stick to some older games. And then finally, I did also try Half-Life 2 in Mint, which actually ran worse than it did in Windows, which was a bit of a theme. I don't think Mint likes this mini PC very much. Even on the desktop, it was feeling more sluggish and less stable than Windows 10, which was not what I was expecting, but I'm guessing it's some kind of driver-related issue with the older Celeron. And on that bombshell, it brings me to the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video, and until the next one, bye-bye.